Welcome to the Hangout Podcast. I'm your host, David Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In today's episode, I sat down with Bob Berk. Bob is principal consultant, coach, and facilitator at New Table Consulting. He has been involved in the conflict mediation world for a long, long time. Prior to that, he was a school administrator for about 15 years, and so he brings an interesting balance of background and experience to his current work. In this wide-ranging conversation, we touched on conflict and its role in organizations, in relationships, both from a productive standpoint and then also where it can become destructive, and then the approaches that he relies on to help two people or large groups, sometimes dozens or more, work through their conflict and really come to an agreement that moves them forward in life. This was a very interesting conversation. And as conflict is a part of all of our lives, I think this is relevant for all of our listeners. Welcome, Bob. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for a chat.
Thanks, David. It's really an honor to be here.
I thought we could start with a little bit about your origin story, where you come from and what brings you to the work that you're currently doing.
Sure. That seems like a good place to start. I'll start by saying this. I am a born and bred Midwesterner, now living in California, but the Midwestern piece is important because Midwesterners don't really like conflict. And I am in a career where I help people work through conflict, which seems somehow counterintuitive. But a little bit about the origin story. I originally, whole life, wanted to be a pediatrician. Went to school, degree in biology, wound up kind of finishing that and realizing, you know what, I spent most of my time in the library talking with friends, all of us who were on the medical school track who just wanted to find a school and teach. So I did that for a while, a couple of years, then went back to graduate school. And then wound up leading schools for about 15 years in Nashville and New Orleans. And then at some point in that process in New Orleans, I took a mediation class because I thought, I didn't want to be a mediator, but I thought, well, these skills for a school principal, these school skills for a school principal must be important. Yeah. The class actually was not so great, but I moved shortly thereafter to San Diego and wound up wanting to volunteer as a mediator. And in order to do so, I had to take kind of that organization's class. It was great. And that kind of launched the career where now I spend my time mostly, 70% of my time is helping individuals or teams or entire organizations work through conflict in some way, shape, or form. And about 30% of my time is spent, hey, you've got a team that's doing pretty well, but you want to be great. Okay, I'm your person.
I think it would be important for the layperson. I'm certainly a layperson in this, so to talk about the difference between mediation, arbitration, litigation. We kind of all know litigation is something we want to be afraid of and run away from. But arbitration, mediation, can you describe the distinction between those two?
Yeah, I can, for sure. And then if it's okay, I'll go a little bit further.
Sure.
I'm not an attorney, and a lot of people come to the mediation world from law. And they're sort of the typical mediators that you think of. Two people come together, they can't agree on something financial mostly. And a mediator will help them kind of do that to figure it out. It's often said that in order to open the door to mediation, you have to be at least willing to move one small, tiny centimeter away from your position. And then kind of the mediator helps along the way. Arbitration is something very different where and one thing about the mediator is they don't make any decisions. They ask questions, they push you, but they're not making decisions. And they don't even have to be content area experts. An arbitrator is someone who, think of more as the judge on high, where
Right.
both sides bring their cases incredibly well thought out based on legal principles, and they say to an arbitrator, you know what? Going to court is going to be too expensive, take too much time. We've got really thought out cases. Here they are, and you decide. And the agreement around arbitration is that it's both parties agree that's legally binding. So you can't go to an arbitrator and then be like, I don't like it. Like, all right. So the bit further is, I don't really do the mediations where somebody has a financial issue and they're trying to agree, how much do I really owe this person? Is it $10,000, $2,000? Like that's not my cup of tea. Um, I do where I live in the mediation space is in workplaces, and sometimes that means I do like the traditional mediation. This party, we work through the issues and we walk out. But most of the time, what it means is I'm do more of facilitating dialogues, and certainly sometimes coming out of that dialogue is an agreement of some sorts, but it's mostly larger groups, people that take a lot more listening on the front end, and then the dialogue, and then oftentimes a lot more work afterwards, kind of to help the organization or the team move forward.
How was that moving from what I would call a traditional 9 to 5 or traditional 7 to 10, depending on how many hours you worked as a school administrator, but a W-2 income, a salary employee to running your own business? And because the work is only part of the work, right? You've got the whole backside of just keeping an operation going. What was that transition like for you, and how did you handle it?
Yes. So you know this extremely well as somebody who leads schools, and that you invest all of this time and energy, so much thought, like you said, a gazillion hours a day, a week, even in the supposed summer, which is off time, and which is not, and you see the results based on like how a kid looks walking in the door that morning and how they look walking out and how their reading skills improved and how they get supported in whatever their needs are. The
Right.
thing about being a school principal is you rarely ever see the financial results of a decision you make and how they impact your own family. And so you're like the ask on your question is 100% right. Like you leave the job of a school principal where you have a salary and you have benefits, and then you move to a job where it's basically, you're going to earn whatever you make, and there's no benefits coming your way unless you provide them. So I'm pretty fortunate, 2 income family. My wife works, and so that provided me the ability to take a leap that I think a lot of other people probably wouldn't have, where I had the ability to kind of have a runway that gave me some ability to make it, which I reflect on. I'm grateful for all the time. I'll tell you. So that's one difference. Like you eat what you kill. The other huge difference between kind of this world that I live in now and the world of a school principal is I have 0 employees. And I say that to somebody who does not have 0 employees. And if you think I'm bragging, David, you're right. It's, I think working on a team with people who you're supervising is one of the most amazing privileges, and you can do such powerful things. And also, I realize that having employees creates an unbelievable amount of stress. And so for me right now, not having that, I certainly work with people and other contractors, but not having employees actually is a benefit that I hadn't thought about that I'm truly appreciating.
Well, I think it's synergistic because, or what's the word? Yeah, I guess it's synergy where people like me who have a bunch of employees, we keep people like you busy.
That's right. It's total job security for me.
So yeah, the other day I said, I just want to work on robot farm.
It's true. I mean, it's like, I think that's true of everything in life. The things that bring most pleasure, like working with people is an unbelievable experience. And also the things that bring most pleasure bring most stress.
That's right. It's like Thanksgiving dinner. If Thanksgiving was every day, it would be an issue.
It would be once a year is enough for sure.
So how do you view like we always hear this terminology all the time that things are more polarized than they've ever been. This is kind of a mantra that we've been hearing, and apart from politics, just in general, kind of whether social media algorithms do it to us or whatever. But it seems to me that there are gradations of conflict, from conflict that we see that lasts generations, the Hatfield and McCoy's type of conflict that the modern Hatfields and McCoys probably can't even remember what the original slight was, 200 years ago. And then there are conflicts that people have been able to work through with or without the help of mediators. Like, how do you think about conflict as you go into work with clients? And at what point do you realize, like, this may never get solved?
Yeah, it happens. Definitely. So, and the question of at what point do you realize it may never get solved? Like, sometimes the answer is immediately, like right away. But this is why I really, if I'm going to engage with a client, sometimes it's very simple. Oh, okay, I get it. Like, you just need this mediation. No problem. Here's a scope of work. Here's a proposal. Like, let's do it, get it done, and so you can move forward. And sometimes I'm listening to people thinking, I'm hearing your story, and I'm sure your story is 100% right. And also, there's probably like 4 other stories here that are also 100% right. And in order to figure out what the path forward is, I have to do a lot of listening. And that's actually, the listening in and of itself oftentimes helps resolve the conflict before I've done anything that I learned in a mediation class or a facilitation, because people want to be listened to. I had an engagement with a Fortune 500 company that started in January last year, and they were really thoughtful in how they structured the engagement. The first 3 times that I went to their location were either one-on-one listening sessions or group listening sessions 3 times. So think about the investment in money that this company said, which was, hey, like, this is really expensive for you to come out and just listen. And also, we know that it's setting you up for kind of it's, setting you up for success. And, originally, I think they had thought, oh, well, I'll work with them for a couple months, but it's gone so well. I'm still working with them. They're incredibly excited about kind of what this group has done in rolling the lessons out kind of internationally to other locations. And I think it's because they set it up in a way where I could really build the trust with listening. So sometimes, like, oh, this will never be solved, can actually be swung by, first, I have to build trust. And then, like, we can make incremental progress.
It's interesting that you say that. I had Amanda Ripley on this. I'm not sure. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she's a best-selling author. She hasn't only written about conflict, but she's written about. I think the first book that she was known for was about disaster and how people react to crises and disasters. But she's become interested in conflict, and she wrote this book called High Conflict. I think the subtitle is something like how people get into it and how to get out or something. And she talked about that, the difference between some conflicts where there's absolutely, like, people are so dug in, it's so binary, and it's kind of almost a life and death experience for people. And then others, as you say, where with enough listening and enough investment of time, people move through it. It's such an interesting concept, because we hear the mantra that, I don't like conflict. I'm conflict averse. If we could just move past it. But can you talk about the positive role of conflict in organizations, families, relationships?
Yeah, for sure. So I think about, when I think about how teams function and like what teams that I've been on that have excited me, that have inspired me, that have kind of driven me to a place of like where I'm better, and also I think I'm making things better for everybody else. Those are teams where we all agreed on the end point. Like, we got to get to here. It's just that every day we didn't necessarily always agree on the best way to get there. And to me, that is kind of the definition of healthy conflict. Like, we are so focused, we're aligned. Stephen Covey, I can't remember which habit it is, but start with the end in mind. And I think this is absolutely advice that, organizations have adopted. When you know where you're going, doesn't mean you know how to get there. What
Right.
happens is like, I've got this idea, you've got this idea. We're not going to necessarily agree, but because we're all aiming for the same spot, even if we're disagreeing, it's productive. Um, and sometimes in my work, I try to fashion that as like a difference between conflict and tension, where it's actually productive tension. And conflict, I like to describe when I work with teams as I see conflict as when we're not all starting with the same place, we're not aligned with where we want to get. Then when those things pop up during the day, like we have no way out because we're not aligned. So I think actually most of my clients don't appreciate this distinction between conflict and tension like I do. So I just stick with conflict now. But for sure, like in on a daily basis, we have to disagree, or we will never get better, or we'll get bored and go someplace else.
It's fascinating, and you probably see so much. You get a chance to delve into like seeing the way that people were raised, right? Because these are, as adults, our behaviors are so deeply embedded from 40 years prior, right? Like what we saw in our families. And I don't want to start telling family anecdotes on here, but like I think about when people get married, they're bringing in usually two completely different streams of like
Yeah,
experience of handling conflict. I think if couples don't talk about that, that's as big as not talking about your philosophy around money too, or whatever in a relationship, right?
absolutely. I think that's 100% sure. But I really do think we should start talking about family issues. You'll lose some of your family members, but we're going to gain so much more of a following. Like if we But yeah, I think you're right. I know kind of your like this idea of it's not just like how we engage in conflict, but even the if we engage in conflict. Like so many families, especially those who grew up around me in the Midwest, like it's the well, we're just going to avoid conflict. It's all fine. And other families, it's like you walk into not it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving meal, any meal. There's going to be back and forth, and like, of course, that would be really uncomfortable for me, but that's kind of how they've grown up. And of course, like to think that that doesn't actually impact how they show up in the workplace or else it would be silly.
There's this story from my family, and I won't say which side or who it is, but there's a family member several generations ago. But it's a story that's lasted where they dropped a kitchen knife on a brand new linoleum floor. So
Uh-huh.
I'm probably dating it just
That's
by
right.
saying linoleum, but it cut the floor. It sliced the floor, and so every day when their spouse would get home from work, they would stand on the slit because there was a certain amount of time in the day when the sun hit at a certain angle when
Uh-huh.
that was visible. And it stayed that way for like decades until they sold the house and that the other spouse never found out about it. And I'm thinking, what a metaphor for like nothing to see here. Keep moving. Let me get you
Right.
dinner.
That is really something. And like after your daughter finishes editing this podcast, she's gonna be like, Dad, like, who? Like, tell me.
Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on that. If you not that you want to do this because it might do away with some of your livelihood, but if you could rewrite or recast the way that most workplaces handle disagreement, conflict, tension, what would be some things you would do?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Because we all know we're bad at it in some way, some of
Yeah.
us we have the skills. And once we start talking, we're good at it. It's just that we're so bad at opening up the conversation, or we won't. I remember my first year as a principal when I had to give feedback to a teacher. It would be Monday, and I knew their planning period. So I'd walk by their classroom and then walk past the other way. Tuesday, same thing. Like
Yeah.
maybe by Thursday, I'd walk into the classroom. So here's the thing about addressing conflict in the workplace. If you think of it as an isolated instance, when this comes up, David, I'm going to approach you, then you failed on the front end. To me, how we address conflict is much larger. It's about the culture that you kind of instill and bring into your workplace. And are you giving feedback? So, for example, when people say to me, we struggle with conflict, we're just so conflict avoidant. The first thing I ask about is, tell me, what does the one-on-one look like with your boss? And people are like, huh? What does that have to do with anything? And to me, what that has to do with is like, are we actually gaining the skills in a one-on-one, hopefully trusted relationship where people give feedback to one another, like both ways feedback to one another, because that's muscle memory. Now, like once we've spoken about what does your one-on-one look like, now let's get to, okay, what does your team meeting with your most immediate team look like? Is it
Right.
basically a to-do list, or are you really batting around ideas? And when David, you say something I disagree with, do I just close my mouth because you're my boss, or do I actually engage back to that in that productive conflict? Because then when I do something that really makes you mad, if
Yeah.
we've got the one-on-one meeting and we've got the team culture meeting, then now like we can address now like you're happy to kind of happy might be pushing it like okay, but like you're able to address it in a way where you don't have a pit in your stomach. And so to me, like when we talk about like hints for conflict resolution, I'm going to go right back at you and say it's not hints for conflict resolution. It's how do you build a culture,
Yeah.
and then we can talk about conflict resolution.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, and I appreciate that. I was reading about Greg Popovich, who was the longtime head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, right? And very successful franchise for a long time. And they said that a lot of his work is not X's and O's. It's taking players out to dinner. He's a foodie and a wine
Yeah.
connoisseur, and he serially just takes his players out to dinner.
Mhm.
And they're all like, "Oh God, you're gonna have a late night tonight because Popovich is taking you out to dinner." And they just it's work at that end, right? Because these are all top athletes. They can play on the court, but it's that team chemistry piece and that trust. And I know one thing I've struggled with as a leader. We have leadership retreats every year, and the hardest thing to do with busy leaders, and we have a leadership team of eight or nine people. The hardest thing to do when you get them away from their regular work, all they want to do is sit there and do checkbox work, because the inclination to get caught up on their endless to-do list is so powerful on one level. But I think on another level, it's that's the easy work. That's easy. The hard work is, hey, there's some tension in our team. Can we talk about this? Or like, what are you guys, the two of you or the three of you or the five of us, whatever, have such a different perspective on this issue. Can we dive deeply? That conversation is so hard to have.
It's so hard to have, and but I'll just say this. It's much easier when you have a brilliant expert facilitator who's going to charge you a lot of money to come do that, David.
Yeah.
So if you need recommendations, just let me know.
I'll send you an email.
But here's the thing about those retreats. Like, they're so important. And to me, the question is like, once you get to the place where you can do that in your retreat and you're having those hard conversations, so like, what's a barrier for us getting to that next level as a team? Then the question is, okay, like, it's so much easier to have these conversations away from the stress of our day. Just like when we have conversations about wanting to be in schools, about wanting to be more thoughtful about how we hold kids accountable for behavior. During in-service week, everybody's got their hat on after a nice summer, and we're like, we want to be really thoughtful, use evidence-based strategies on responding to kind of behavior struggles. And then 3 weeks in, like this kid misbehaves, and the teacher comes up to you after, and she says, "Why didn't you suspend him?" And it's like the same thing with team retreats. It's like, it's so much easier to think about these when we're one step away. And so I think the push for me on those team retreats and thinking about how we do conflict is like, who's going to be responsible? So if you have 8 people at that retreat, who are the 2 or 3 people who are going to form an action team to make sure the ideas, thoughts, like decisions that you've decided at the retreat actually get put in place? Because otherwise, from a conflict resolution perspective, like, you're just going to ignore it, because why wouldn't you? It's so much easier.
It's so interesting to me to reflect on the fact that, and I think you and I spoke about this in a pre-call or in the previous attempt at this before my internet went out, that fundamentally there are probably only very few causes of conflict in this world.
Yeah.
Right? Can you talk about the common themes, since you're so deeply embedded in this work? Like you could probably write most of them on one post-it note, no matter if you're working with corporate America, education, a Native American tribe somewhere, whatever it is. There's probably just a short list of causes, right?
It's a pretty short list. You're 100% right. And I found that this is a short list. It doesn't matter where in the world you wind up. Like it's pretty much the same in the workplace. The lists are I mean, in my mind, I think it all starts with respect.
Right.
So like respect is one piece. Communication, collaboration, roles and responsibilities. So like
Mhm.
basically stop there. I in most cases, of course, I want to listen to you to build trust, but I already know we're going to be talking about respect, communication, collaboration, roles and responsibility. Now, there's other things that are kind of embedded in that. Like when we think about it's a buzzword now to talk about psychological safety.
Right.
Totally. Like I think it's important. Also, like how people get acknowledged for their work. Like things underlie those, but it's really those four things that I come back to time and time again.
Yeah, that. And full disclosure, we're now using formal mediation in the workplace because we ran into challenges where the perception of our HR department, we have a very
Hmm.
capable, hardworking HR director, but the perception from the past was I got reported to HR.
Yeah.
Like that was like that's the word on the street. I mean, it's something out of the show The Office, like,
Right.
oh Jesus, I got reported to HR and you got to go in there and Toby goes, oh, so yeah, I noticed, and you're like, oh my God, how do I just get me out of here? And so we've started to try to get people to voluntarily go to a mediation session,
Hmm.
and we've really seen some movement in terms of their ability to work together.
Yeah, I believe it. The thing is, like, I was once mediating in a school, but well, we did it outside of school, but it was between two teachers, and they were like they had been good friends, which always then adds to the dynamic. One
Right.
was not just friends, one was older, one was younger. There was like a mentor relationship, but this relationship was broken.
Right.
And this is like I use this example as whenever I'm feeling, oh, I don't know, like, am I really good at this? I go back to this one because like midway through, it was like I was ready to just, oh my gosh, I don't know that this is gonna work. Like one is literally standing, screaming, and then looking at me and being like, "See, I told you," and which of course happens sometimes. And then at the end of it, it was like they had gotten to this place where somehow, and like maybe some of it was facilitation skills, but mostly I think they came in with the mindset like, even though we really hate each other right now, like we want to make change. And at the end of it, like they're like, let's ditch the afternoon of school and let's go have lunch together. And I was like, yes, you've already got the subs. Let's go have lunch. Like they got to a place where like through this conversation with a trained mediator, me, like that they were able to really hear each other. And that makes all the difference in the world. It's like the issues matter, but more matters that like I'm hearing the impact that this has had on you.
Do you have a case or a mediation case, I guess you call them, or a situation that you're most proud of? Obviously, without giving identifying details, but that was one. That's an inspiring one. Do you have another example of something that just you hold up either when you're helping to teach other people to do this work, or when you're feeling low and you go, but I got through this situation. I can do
Yeah.
today. Can
Yeah.
you talk a bit about that?
Well, so it's interesting because of course the first thing that jumped into mind when you said that, I'll get to that one in a minute. But like some might say, oh well, I don't know if that was a success. But in my mind, it certainly wasn't like what I got hired to do. I'll get to it in a minute. But I think that like the piece, the one that I keep coming back to is this engagement that I mentioned a little bit before with the listening sessions, and it's a huge company, and um, what I got called in to do had a really large impact on their bottom line, and like then, and also like moving to the future, big public national news type thing. And I think the reason why I'm so proud of the work that kind of I've done, and also like the collectively have done, the people on their team and then also people on my team. I think the reason I'm so proud of it is because at this point in the engagement, the things that have to happen are not being driven by me, like they're being driven by the leadership at this company. And I'm supporting where they're like, look, we don't have the expertise, but I'm supporting along the way. And when I started, they were in a place was where like of fear, of anxiety, of there's no way I'm going to be in, like, even though in many cases, like they were the leaders, like I am not going to work with that person. And that's been the shift. And I think the pride for me comes out of that. Um, not necessarily in my work, although I think it's been good, but in just seeing kind of their shift. And time helps, like time helps, right? But also I think they've like been really reflective and worked incredibly hard. And that's true of like people on all sides or whatever, I'm being intentionally vague, where people have done a lot of work to say it's the relationship that matters most. Like, let's dig into the relationship. The other example I want to give you was something that happened over summer where I was asked to kind of mediate in a team. One person on the team was not fitting in with the rest of this kind of um, fewer than 10 people with this team. And the ask was like mediate and then come in and do a training for the day and how they can work better together. And then, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a tall order. And then when I met the people, I was like, this is going to be a tall order, not because there's something wrong with any of the people, but because like this was an example of conflict where I didn't see that like maybe I could do something and be helpful for a month. But in the end, I felt like there's no resolution here that's going to land well. And what wound up happening is the one person who was kind of struggling with the rest of the team, and I'm not putting the blame on her, I'm just saying like there was this one versus kind of other dynamic. I kept asking like, tell me what you love about this job, because it sounds to me like you show up with a stomach ache, you leave with a stomach ache, and like we got to this place where, she was able to say, well, I love the idea of the job. Like I love the pieces of the job, not necessarily the people I'm doing it with. And to me, like part of the mediator's job is to ask questions to get people to think, to move a little bit. And I think in my time with her, we got to this place where there was just realization, this job isn't going to be the right one for me. And so what wound up happening is I was able to actually, I mean, I still went through with the training for the whole team, but I was actually with the support of the HR department and with their permission, I should say, before I dive further, shift it to be like, okay, well, let's figure out a way for you to move forward separately from kind of this company. And in the end, she said, she got a little bit of money, and in the end, her words literally were, "Thank you. Like this agreement is life changing for me." And I don't stay in touch with people after mediations. That's not part of it, so I don't know where things have gone. But I think it's not just that it was life changing for her, which is enough. Also, the team that kind of she left, they also now have an opportunity to reform and figure out a path forward in a way that's better for them and better for the business.
Sounds like you help get her unstuck in a certain way.
Yeah, in thinking about, and like admittedly, like the money had something to do with it, but it was the mindset first.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you think about like engaging with groups, what role does, or one or more people, I guess, or two or more people, what role does culture play in your preparation? So to be specific, you're a guy from the Midwest,
Yeah.
and your clients could always grow up all over the place and different languages, cultures, backgrounds, and even philosophies on conflict. I'm sure there are certain cultural backgrounds that are very overt and open about conflict, and yelling inappropriately for one culture is totally appropriate for another. How do you navigate that without coming across as like the tone deaf white guy, I guess is what my question.
Right. So I'm pretty good at just kind of naming what, how I show up in the world. And sometimes you just gotta name it, like we're very different. And people, like some organizations will say, I remember I had this engagement with an international education group. and all of the employees where the concern were, and I hadn't met any of them, but they were all kind of young. They were all women. They were all people of color. I am
Right.
none of those things. And they asked, like the people who are hiring me asked about that, and I think it's an important question. And so I think there's two ways to think about this. One is like um, everybody, when you walk into a room and you realize, okay, like the first thing that I have to do in this hard situation is build trust. But it's not
Right.
just in a hard situation. Like think about your world when you're trying to get the kindergartners to choose you, your school. What's the
Yeah.
most important thing? Build trust.
Yeah.
So like we always as humans walk through life figuring out ways to build trust with people who are different than us. Some of us are better at it than others. And like there's a small number of us who don't care. Like our egos are so big. Like that but most of us walk into a situation always thinking about like how do we build trust in this example. And so I think the way I structure engagements now where I'm curious, like, is this going to be an issue, is I always like, look, it doesn't do me any good to proceed with an engagement that doesn't feel like it's going to work. And this
Sure.
hasn't happened to me, but I think it's worth narrating and saying, like, look, there's a discovery part of this. Part of the discovery is me figuring out what you all need to move forward. If during that discovery I realize I'm not the right person, then I'm going to like refer you to a colleague to do the work and back out, and I've never had to do that, but I think just naming that to people where they
Right.
say, okay, this person is vulnerable and reflective enough to realize he can't be the solution to everybody. And normally that says to people, okay, like let's give it a shot. And what I realize is um, almost everybody who I wind up working with in these moments, they want to make life better for themselves and for the other person. And if I'm the tool to get there, they're in. And the reason I say almost everybody is because I think we just have to acknowledge that like mental illness does come into play also in the workplace. And all of these strategies that we have around kind of listening and building trust and helping people communicate with one another, like they're confounded by mental illness. And I have a lot of empathy for that and realization. And like, and also kind of an understanding that at some point, like there's a very small percentage of cases where like you're probably not going to be able to kind of make progress. And in the workplace, that's really hard because I'm not going to bring it up, and neither is the HR person.
And how do you, as a mediator, that's a fascinating topic that you bring up. How do you, as a mediator, know when you're getting too close to the therapy line?
Yeah, right, right. So it's interesting because in my coaching, like which is slightly separate, I'm very clear like this is not therapy. And I would actually say in like half of the engagements when people are exploring like, hey, I'm looking for a coach, they will verbalize before they even know me. Like they'll be like, I'm not looking for a therapist. And I'm like,
Right.
great, because I am not a therapist. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think this is a hard question, and I think for you as somebody who's spent your career supervising people, it's like I could ask that question right back at you because
Sure.
anybody who's a manager kind of works through that. And I think my job is to help people to be reflective about what's going on in the moment or what immediately happened in the past that's led to this moment or how to be more successful about the immediate future. In
Mm.
therapy, like they're much more interested in kind of the why underneath it.
Right.
I, as a human being, am of course interested in the why because I care about you, even if
Right.
I just met you. But for my role as a mediator, um, like sometimes the way back why is less important,
Right.
and more important is okay. Well, what are we hearing today, and what are the behaviors we're agreeing to moving forward? So sometimes I think it's important for me to remind myself that like a really, really, really deep exploration in a workplace mediation is probably less productive, um, and not my role.
Talk to us a little bit about the coaching element of what you do too. We haven't
Yeah.
touched on that much, but you brought it up. And is it like a life coaching approach or?
Um, I don't do life coaching. I think there's a really valuable role for life coaches kind of in the society, and that's not where I think I add value. Mostly I have two different places around coaching. One is coaching just on leadership development. So you as a leader want to get better in some way, shape, or form. Great. Like I love that role. And that's really good. More I love this idea of coaching after I've worked with you for a while. And one, like, I think the internet, like the coaching federation would say, well, this isn't coaching, Bob. It's more consulting. But like, I love to coach people on like, how do you continually work through conflict in your organization? And so making myself almost like open office hours or um, what I've found incredibly valuable this year is I have a couple different kind of leadership teams where I've structured. I'm meeting once a month with their like senior leader, and that's more traditional coaching. And then once a month, I'm also working with the management team, the senior leadership team, for coaching. And it's not defined this way, but it certainly comes up this way that almost always people come in like, I'm having this supervisory issue.
Sure.
Can we address this? And so, like, I think that is like a hybrid of coaching, but also it's just um, as part of that, I always tell people, look, any 15 minutes you need before you're going to go have a conversation, you're nervous about that conversation, jump on my Calendly link, grab 15 minutes. Let's talk through that conversation in advance. And to me, I think like some of the most impactful work that I've done in kind of that coaching sphere is to help people with kind of that immediate work that's happening the very next day.
That's right. Yeah, it's like really relevant and grounded in practice. Sounds like.
Yeah, right.
What would your current age and experienced self tell your 21-year-old self about the way that your life and career were going to unspool, and what's some guidance that you would give your younger self? Because you've had a really fascinating career trajectory in two industries that are somewhat related and then also not related.
Yeah. So one thing is like, don't be so conflict avoidant, engage with it. That'll be the first thing. Um, and I think the second thing would be like, don't go put yourself on a team working for someone who's not going to give you feedback. And if you are on a team with someone who's not giving you feedback, demand it, ask for it regularly. That's different than somebody who's a mentor, right? Like your supervisor needs to give you feedback to help you grow. And I have had amazing supervisors who did that. I don't think I realized why I thought they were so amazing at the time, but in hindsight, that's why. And I've had supervisors who were not good at that, and I
Right.
should not have stayed. Like because how do you grow if you're not? And I think what happened is in my first year as a principal, um, I followed a principal who was uniformly disliked, which is great to do. Like everybody loves you right away.
Right.
Um, but they and the teachers in the first couple of months kept talking about how great I was. I saw everything, acknowledged everything. At the end of the year, the most veteran teacher in the school was like, Bob, we loved you. We all loved you right away. But now, like we actually, you never told one of us anything on how to get better. And so we think you're a little bit fake. Like that's really hard to hear. Like those were her words 25 years later. I still have them. And so
Sure.
I think like it's not like my younger self, like find someone who's going to give you feedback. Don't avoid conflict. And then my younger self in kind of those leadership roles would be like if you value people, you have to help them get better. That's part of the agreement you make in an organization. And I failed on that for my first couple of years of being a leader. And when I finally figured out how to do that well, I think the nature of the teams I led changed fundamentally.
What's some advice you would give to people? I'll just keep it really specific. Leaders in education, although I think it probably applies more broadly, where very often the industry norm has been meets expectations. Anything that's written down, everybody's so either afraid of litigation. We live in a very litigious society, or there's a collectively bargained agreement. So there are a lot that just like not does not meet expectations is the third rail, and you touch it, and then it means you're going to spend 50 hours
Yep.
of meetings with people, and they're going to bring in an advocate, and la la la. How does someone give meaningful feedback, help other people grow, help the team grow in that environment?
Yeah. So I don't want to make light about the challenges of kind of that type of environment. I lived in that. It's really hard. I think a lot of people live in a similar environment where you have very clear expectations on how people are evaluated, union or not union. We have very clear expectations on how people are evaluated and when it's supposed to happen, and a process to follow if it's not done well. And at the same time, and I would push and say, look, if we think about talent management as a once a year conversation, then we gotta go have one of those retreats with our senior leadership team and reframe in our minds what talent management is.
Right.
Because you will never be successful given that setup in a once a year conversation. And so how do you build the trust where you can actually have those conversations kind of monthly? And they're not about accountability, they're about learning and growing. And how do I know they're not about accountability and about learning and growing is because when I sit down, if I'm the principal and you're the teacher, and we're going to have these kind of more regular meetings, I've set up a structure where it's not just me giving you feedback. You're driving the meeting, you're giving me feedback. We're both giving each other feedback. And there are a lot of people in education who don't want that. I get it. They don't want that. Also, I'm going to push and say there are a whole lot of people in education who do, if you've built the trust and are willing to kind of build that trust. Because most people who have not yet become jaded, and that happens in every industry, they want a learning curve. They want to continue to learn and grow. Well,
You've been very generous with your time, and I realize you're busy today, and you probably have someone with conflict in about 13 from now. So I'm going to ask you the last question. This is a hypothetical.
Yeah.
If you were given the opportunity to create a billboard on the side of the freeway, whatever freeway is closest to your home, what does Bob Berk's billboard say about your belief in what's important in this life, what's important in your work, and why?
Yeah. I'm going to give you two answers. I'll get two billboards. So the first is just a really big billboard that one word, which says listen. And I just think, what do we know about the research coming out of politics? If you try to convince somebody to move your way, they will move further in theirs. If you spend time, if you spend time listening to them, they're going to move a little bit towards you. So the first billboard is going to say listen. That's it. Maybe my phone number so I can get some business out of it too. The second billboard's you're going to have that Maya Angelou quote about people won't remember the words you said. They're just going to remember how you feel, how they felt when you said it, and I'm not quoting her directly, but I think we all know the quote. And I think, look, that quote resonates to me as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, as a university student, as a graduate student, as somebody first year teacher. It resonates every place in my life. And when I think back, it's not how somebody else made me feel where I kind of sit with most struggle. It's how I know I made somebody else feel when I could have done something different. And in my world, in the conflict resolution space, that impact on somebody, how you're making somebody feel is your impact on them. That's the $1 million work right there.
Thank you so much, Bob, for that, for your wisdom today, for your perspective. Your work is exceedingly valuable in this world, and I actually don't subscribe to the idea that we're more polarized than we've ever been. I think as humans, it's just part of who we are. You'll have work as long as you want work. So that's a good. Thank you so much for your time. This has been very enjoyable for me and informative.
Yeah, it's really been an honor. And I'm going to invite myself to come tour the new high school building when it's built.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty excited about that newness for you.
Thanks for joining us on the Hangout Podcast. You can send us an email at podcastinfo@proton.me. Many thanks to my daughter Maya for editing this episode. I'd also like to underline that this podcast is entirely separate from my day job. And as such, all opinions expressed herein are mine and mine alone. Thanks for coming on in and hanging out.